Hi, welcome. I'm Ivory. This is Roz, and today's topic is Leave Regrets Behind. First, we'd like to say hello to our listeners in Sioux City, Iowa. Thank you for tuning in week after week. We are delighted to have you here. It's really fun to look at that. I wish I could share with all of you. People ask me about this, but there's listeners all over the world, and it's interesting to see where people are tuning in, places you might not think would have interest in a show like this. So, yay. So let's talk about this. Leave regrets behind. Roz, do you have regrets?
Of course. I have to work on those all the time.
Do you know anybody who doesn't have regrets?
No.
Me either. When I was 17, I worked at a nursing home. And it was kind of fun because my grandparents didn't live close to me. And so all the people in the nursing home were like my grandparents, and I loved them. And a number of them would sit me down and say, now listen, honey, whatever you do, don't have regrets. Because when you're old like us, it's really going to bother you. And so it really made an impression on me. And I thought, all right, I'm not going to have regrets. It's impossible because we just don't know the choices we're making, the ramifications that are going to happen because of a choice we made, or even a choice we didn't make can be just as important. There's no way. So I'm telling all you young people out there, don't bother trying to, you can try to avoid regrets, but you're going to have some, probably some big ones.
You know, my mother had the most amazing memory. She never forgot anything.
That's
And I
good
am
and
so
that's bad,
thankful.
Roz.
I'm
That's
so
good and
thankful
that's
that
bad.
I don't have that memory. Because if I did, I'd probably have a lot more regrets than I do. Because most of my regrets are centered in behaviors that I exhibit.
That's hard to believe, Roz.
Oh, yeah. I
Did you
mean,
act out, Roz? Did you get angry?
just a tinge.
Most of mine are more about bad choices I made. And occasionally it still happens, but especially when I was younger, it would sometimes keep me up at night. I'd start thinking about it, and like one regret would slide into another, slide into another. Next thing you know, it's 4 a.m. and I haven't been to sleep yet. So that's something I've really had to work on. And occasionally I still find myself, I'll realize I'm starting it and I have to shut that down. And so later
Yeah.
we're going to talk about ways to shut it down. Um, I guess I think we should talk about, do you have any ways to avoid regrets now, Roz, at your age, at your point of wisdom?
I don't know that I'm at my point of wisdom, but
Oh, you are. You're a wise woman.
I try really hard not to start down that pathway. Just not to start down it at all. When I start going into the what ifs or the if onlys, I try to just slam that door shut because you can't change history. I mean, you're not going to change what happened. So you might as well, make peace with that, realize that, yeah, these were things that I didn't handle well. I probably, no doubt, could have handled them much better. But I can't change that now. And a lot of the people or pets or whoever was involved in those choices, I mean, they're gone now. So focusing on that and having regret is a huge, actually, detriment to your energy because you need to be using your energy now to move forward, to facilitate positive things, to acknowledge, the good things that are happening, etc. So I just try to never get on that pathway.
I'm going to
Like,
get back to like avoiding having regrets. I do feel like I've gotten a lot better with just knowing how bad things can go, like how far things can go off the rail. I think there's been times in the past I made not necessarily impulsive decisions. Sometimes were impulsive, and sometimes those are okay and sometimes they're not. But the biggest ones I noticed were when I made impulsive decisions and particularly did not talk with people who knew about that topic. And I'm going to give you a for instance here. This one's not about me. It's about somebody I know. So my family is very much involved in real estate, construction. And so there's a lot of knowledge base there. And somebody in the family bought a piece of land because a friend who has no knowledge in any of those areas told them all this information. And then they found out that the property doesn't have the amenities, doesn't have the necessary things that they thought it did. And they paid a lot of money thinking it did. So I've done things like that, especially when I was young and I wanted to make my own decisions. I wanted to be independent and I didn't want to get input. Sometimes we need input. If you don't have expertise in the field, if you don't have expertise in that area of decision, and you know somebody who's gone through it or knows about it, I've learned to ask. And I don't always do what they say, but I definitely take their information, their feedback, their advice into serious consideration. And I haven't had a lot of regrets since I started instituting that one.
I think the other thing about regret is, in addition to it just tapping your energy and really being kind of a waste of your energy, because you can't change anything. If you can look forward and you can see the same situation, these are learning experiences too that were sent. So if you can look forward and see the same kind of situation sort of shaping up and coming towards you, that totally negates any reason for regret of what happened before, because you've been offered an opportunity to correct and to kind of like redo that situation. I think that's very valuable for people.
I think it is too.
And I look at things that, I look at like the big life events, like decisions when you're young that are kind of forced on you. Like, one of mine was like, should I go to college? Well, that wasn't even a question in my family. You were going to college. But I reached a point when I was in college when I thought, this isn't really what I think I'm going to want to do long term. But I was, like a year away from my degree. And my father, was not in good health then. And he was just devastated by the idea that I might not have a degree. Because in my parents' world, if you had a degree, that opened the door for everything wonderful. Because it was the 60s, it was the 60s. Then what can I say? So looking back on those situations, I felt like there was a value in having that piece of paper, but did I regret the time that I invested in that when I could have been doing other things that I wanted to be doing? That was a big mountain to go over, to look at that part of my life and think it wasn't really regret, but yeah, it was regret.
That's like, how could you know? I mean, you were going by the best knowledge you had at that time. And so, when you're young, I think you just don't have the pool of wisdom within yourself that
True.
years of living bring to you. So my biggest regrets have always been about relationships, getting into really toxic relationships and not getting out of them soon enough, thinking I could help these people. And that's something that I feel like those have been gigantic lessons for me. And now, because of those lessons, because of hindsight, going forward, I see red flags and I am gone. I don't even pursue, I don't even go a step further. So So that makes me feel good because I know that wasn't wasted. I got wiser, I learned, and maybe that's a cycle I've had in lifetime after lifetime and didn't even know it. And I really needed to get some help with that. So it's interesting. We just don't really understand, but we can get wiser. So looking back on how things went before, what got you in trouble, um, I don't know.
I
Any
can't
other?
really say, I just really can't say that I feel like you know, time dwelling on all of those things, if you don't get a big lesson, it's too valuable for you. So I think, your acknowledgement that, like, okay, I have changed my behaviors. So that really, to me, neutralizes any regret you might feel, because you got the lesson and you adjusted.
I think so too. And I try to pay really close attention to all of this. Sorry, I'm trying to make my camera behave. It's doing bizarre things. So bear with me. I
That's
was on
not
my
really
side,
funny.
suddenly hovering over Havasu Falls. Ah,
Wow, and you turned sideways for a second.
I know. Whee! I was telling Roz right before we started the show, my monitor, my webcam, and my ring light crashed over. So now I've upset my ring light, and my webcam's doing weird things. So I think this is its payback for me. I'll get it under control. Bear with me here. Um, as far as regrets, like when people come to me and they have them, you touched on this earlier, Roz, and I think it's really the core of the issue. We can't go back and change the past, and we really don't know what the future will bring. So all we have is this moment right now. This is real. This is happening. And I'm not pushing on like the power of now and all that. Yeah, it's good. And if it works for you, that's fantastic. But just try to be present. And if you find your mind rehashing the past, or you're worrying about the future and what you might do in the future, go back down. Where am I right now? What do I need to focus on right now? Because you said it best, Roz, when you were talking about regrets over going to college, time spent there for a career you didn't really want to do. Our biggest asset that we have is our time, and it is limited. And if we waste
And our energy.
I've always told people, if you went to college, you thought you needed to be a major, let's say you needed to be a business major, you get there and you hate it, or your parents expect you to be a lawyer and you've been studying to be a lawyer and you only have 1 year left. Do you loathe it? You've already wasted this much time. Do you really want to waste more and then get into the career and then have a harder and harder time moving on to what you really want to do? It's just wasting more of your time and energy. So there's a time to cut it loose.
I think the attitude about investing your time in your future, career or pursuit or whatever, has changed a little bit too. So I don't think there's as much, in a lot of cases, there's just not as much pressure applied to people in that age bracket where they're considering that path. So, to avoid regret, I mean, to never be in the situation, where you're going to have to leave regret behind. I mean, definitely go with that flow that you're talking about. Like, do you want to just continue down this path where you're moving yourself into a career or even a lifestyle or a relationship or whatever it is, where you're going to struggle with that choice? So it's important.
It is. I think back to, even I can remember being about 9 years old, and that's when my mom voiced her desire, her dream for me to be a writer or a college English professor. And I remember thinking at the time, I don't want to do either one of those things. All I want to do is sing. And you know that. I just want to sing, and so later, I think it's hilarious. I ended up being a writer. I was never a college English professor or a college professor of any kind, not interested, but I did become a writer. So kudos to you on that one, Mom. But for my daughter, she would say, "What do you want me to be when you grow up?" And I said, "Happy." I consciously never pushed her toward a specific career, and whatever she wanted to do, I supported her. She said she wasn't going to go to college, and that was, her father had passed away. And I'm sure that was part of her reaction to that. And she was 15. And then right after high school, like she's going to college, and she left home and moved to the Phoenix area and enrolled, and she ended up going to like an art institute. She's very artistic and she's very creative. And I thought, wow, my head was spinning, but I was happy because I want her to find, I know she's passionate about art, and I wanted her to do that. And it's funny because she did use that for a career for a while, but that's not what she does now, but it still comes into play. So we have to be easy on ourselves. We're guided to do things for a reason. It may be a while before we know why we were guided. We've talked about this, Roz, like how our past careers help us in this career, but we
So
couldn't have
true.
seen it.
So true.
Being a business person is a good idea at any time. If you think you're going to have a business, you want to be involved in business first. But as far as dealing with them, I think that's tricky. I think it is tricky, and it's different for each person. Hopefully you don't beat yourself up too much. One of the things I always do is I tell myself, if I start thinking about specific thing that I have regret about, I'll think, okay, what was I like at age 18? I was a kid. I was naive. I was pretty innocent. I was not worldly. I did not have a lot of wisdom at that point. I was a smart kid, but not a lot of wisdom. And I made decisions I would never make now. So how can I look back at my 18-year-old self and judge that version of myself as being dumb, bad, wrong? I was making the best decision I could with the knowledge I had at the time, and considering that I was 18. I didn't even have a fully formed brain yet. So
It's
it
so
takes
true.
till 23, sadly.
I read frequently where people, their lives have gone off track and they're very unhappy with where they are. And it's so interesting because I always look at those situations and I think the only one who can change so that you're not living this regretful existence, the only one who can change your direction is you. It has to be you. And the more you ask other people their opinions, sometimes the more confusing things beget. And the regret of all of that can just be overwhelming. So I just feel like letting go, working on yourself and letting go of those regretful periods in your life and not dwelling on it. Get the lesson and move on.
Do you mean asking people their opinion of a choice you made?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because that just, in a way, it's fine to be a part of that. And, your friends and family, of course, they always want to be involved. But the reality is it's you that has to live it. And it's you that has to experience the regret if you don't take the path that you feel you want to. So it's a pretty pertinent issue today, I think.
Problem with asking other people about the choices you already made is you're asking people to judge you. And those people, especially if they're not on a spiritual path, they don't understand you. Maybe they have a distorted view of you, or they look at you like you're still a teenager, like you're still a kid. And sometimes parents and family members will do that. They just cannot break out of seeing you as a kid, how you were. Then you're asking people who don't understand you or the situation or the choices in front of you to judge your choice. And I think that is a danger zone to kind of bring harsh criticism upon yourself that's unnecessary. It's kind of like when, and I know, Roz, you've seen clients for this too a lot, when they're trying to figure out what their life purpose is, and then they finally get an idea and they're really feeling it. They get that internal push. They're hearing messages like, you need to do this, and they run it by their family. And the family's like, oh, you're crazy. You're going to do that? And they
Why
might
would
derail
you do
your
that?
mission. Yeah. It was like when I told my family I'm leaving the field of mental health and moving across the mountain to Sedona and opening up this business to do spirituality work. There was like, what? What? But they don't know. They don't have my relationship with my angels or even their own angels the way that I do. They don't feel the strong push towards a life purpose. I do, a spiritual purpose that I do. And so I didn't ask anybody anything, and I'm still not asking for feedback because I know very strongly I was guided to be here. And I know you were too, Roz. We've talked about that. You
Yeah.
didn't move back to Sedona because you like it better than Big Bear.
I would feel like I had just made my mind up so much that I was never coming back. And ironically, I mean, the fact of how everything evolved for me, I know that it was just all a part of that whole spectrum of events. So I can't say that I've had any regrets about any of that, you know.
What's the point? You can't change it. Again, you can't change it. I kind of a last thing I want to say on this is for myself is on my website, that ivoryangelicmedium.com website, there's a tab at the top that says resources. And then in the drop down menu, you'll see forgiveness prayers. Go to that page. Do the forgiveness prayer for yourself. We talk about the importance of forgiving yourself. Forgive yourself for all the bad mistakes you've made, all the opportunities you didn't accept. You didn't walk through those doors. Forgive yourself so that you can leave the baggage of those regrets behind. Do you want to say one last thing about this, Roz?
Nope, I totally agree with that.
Forgive yourself.
Yeah.
We hope this is helpful for you today. Next Friday, we have a very interesting topic. It's signs of possession. There's more and more of it happening. Roz and I are seeing it everywhere we go. And we're going to talk about that so that you can be aware. Maybe you're already dealing with it. In the meantime, we hope you have an enlightening week.